and I wish someone told me this, is you just actually have to care less. Like, a lot of reasons why people don't do something is because, yeah, I think it's so important. Like, you can only write your future, and it is always difficult when you look in an industry and you can't find anyone that looks like yourself. But then go be that person, and then you'll inspire other women and make the path easier for them to be able to go and do it.
If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your 16-year-old self, what would that piece of advice be? Hello everyone, and welcome to The Hidden Blueprint by Pragmat, a podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders, where we uncovered the blueprint behind some of the world's best. Today, I'm excited to welcome Grace Hardy, the founder of Hardy Accounting. Grace started her journey into accountancy at just 18 years old, qualified as an accountant at 20, and went on to establish her own accounting firm by the time she turned 21. She's a passionate advocate for apprenticeships, entrepreneurship, and financial education. If you're a young person looking to forge their own path without taking the traditional university route, then this is a must watch. This is the blueprint of Grace Hardy. Grace, you started your journey in accountancy at just 18 years old with an apprenticeship at one of the top 10 firms, and by 21 you'd already founded your own business. Can you take us back to that initial decision to pursue an apprenticeship instead of going to university? What led you to choose that path?
So for me, I knew I didn't want to go to university, mostly because I struggle with dyslexia. So being in a university environment where there's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of essays isn't necessarily somewhere I knew I would thrive. So I knew I didn't want to go to university. So I said to my mum, right, what do I do? And she said, well, you need to get some sort of formal qualification. You can't just end your education at A level. She was like, I'm not having that. So I said, okay, well, what do I go and do? At the time, she was a training provider for NHS apprenticeships, and she said, had you thought of an apprenticeship? And very naively, at 17, I thought, well, I thought you could only do apprenticeships in like hairdressing and construction. Like, I don't want to do that. I loved politics and economics and all that sort of stuff at school. So she went, don't be so stupid, go away, do some research, and come back to me and see what you find. So I went away and found a economics degree apprenticeship within the government, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I got all the way to the last stage, which is called the assessment centre, and the last task was a timed essay. So unfortunately, I didn't get that apprenticeship. So very naively at 17, I thought, right, what's close to economics? Tax. So I started applying for these tax apprenticeships. It was very late in the year. I think it was about May, June to start in the September. So a lot of roles had already been filled, and then they said, right, okay, this role is filled, but we really like you. Would you mind doing an accounting apprenticeship instead? And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, I'll do it. I don't really know what it means, but at least I've got something. So then I said yes, and that is how I got into accounting.
Did you always have a passion for entrepreneurship, and is that something that was always deep within you, that you wanted to start your own thing, you wanted to have your own business?
I was that weird kid in the playground that would sell sweets to people to make some extra pocket money. And ever since I knew what the meaning of self-employed was, I wanted to be self-employed. I didn't necessarily know in what, because when I was growing up, I wasn't particularly very good at one certain thing. Like, you know, how when some kids grow up, they're like, right, I'm so talented at biology, like, I'm gonna be a vet. That just never happened for me. And so I just never knew what it was. And then when I got my AAT level 4 qualification and realised I could start my own business, I was like, amazing, let me start a business because I've already always wanted to do one. And if it doesn't work out, fine, but at least I can say I've tried.
You said often about how your apprenticeship sort of gave you that hands-on experience that a lot of graduates maybe don't have after they've completed their university degree. What would you say were the key learnings from that time that then gave you that confidence to open Hardy Accounting?
I think for me personally, it's all those like soft skills that you learn. So the communication, the problem solving, all of that sort of stuff is so important. So I used to train graduates that had come out of university and then go into the workplace when I was about 18, 19. And you can see that they come out with so much theoretical knowledge, which is amazing, of course, but they've got no practical skills because 9 times out of 10 they haven't done like a work placement. And so they don't know how to properly communicate with a client. Their problem solving skills aren't as good as they could be because they haven't had to be in that real world environment.
So then for aspiring entrepreneurs out there, whether they want to maybe pursue a degree at university or an apprenticeship, regardless of which path they choose, how important would you say getting some hands-on experience, whether it just be in the forms of internships, summer experiences?
I think they're incredibly vital. I think you learn by doing. I've made so many mistakes on my journey, but I've learned something from every single one of those. And if I hadn't made the mistakes, then I wouldn't have grown as a person or a business owner. So any experience you can find is perfect, but you can also make your own work experience. So if you want to start like a virtual assistant business or something like that, or you want to do some like free work for someone that like runs a social media page and you want to get some experience in social media, you just reach out and go, hey, like, can I do XYZ for you for free? And it's all about building your portfolio up and those skill sets as well, because for me personally, when I started my business, I didn't have a lot of skills I have now, so I never really used social media before, but now predominantly all my clients come from social media. I didn't have any sales or marketing experience, and so that's something I've learned by building a business. So it's really important to do as much as you can to gain as many skills as possible.
So speaking about learning from sort of doing, again, as a young entrepreneur, sort of early 20s, but how important would you say it is when you are starting your own business and when you do start accumulating all these responsibilities, you're making these key decisions, how important would you say for you it has been in terms of learning from your mistakes?
I think it's so crucial. Like, you can't learn without making mistakes. Like, as I said, I've made so many. I've learned something from all of them. And then when people ask you, oh, what mistakes did you make? You can tell them. They're obviously going to make their own mistakes because I don't believe you can run a business perfectly. You'll always make a mistake. But it's also embracing that, because I think at school also we're told just to be perfect all the time. When we get something wrong, like, it's a bad thing. And that's sort of ingrained in us. And I think why a lot of people don't start businesses is because they're really like afraid of failure, because it's always looked as such a negative thing. But I think in some ways, as horrible as it is sometimes, it's really important and it's actually can be such a positive thing. So for me, I've like failed a lot, like tons, but that's great. It's all personal development. But everyone needs to make their own mistakes. You'll never run a perfect business.
Yeah, I think fear of failure is one of the sort of biggest reasons that a lot of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs don't actually take that leap and go for it. What would you say to someone out there who's maybe thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur, but is maybe afraid of failing, whether that be from the way that looks from the outside or just as having it on their personal record and on their conscience? What would you say to them?
I think, and I wish someone told me this, is you just actually have to care less. Like, a lot of reasons why people don't post on social media or they don't do something is because they're worried about how they'll be perceived by other people. They'll go, oh, Becky from school is really going to judge me if I post this on social media. But actually, if Becky from school isn't like improving yourself, she's not making your money for you, she's not growing your business, then actually her opinion doesn't matter. And if you're worried about how it will be perceived on your conscience, then to be completely honest, then you know that there's work you need to do on yourself as well. Like, I've been there, I've gone, oh, if I do this, I'm really going to judge myself because that's really cringy. But actually, you need to do it to be able to grow your business and like get clients and make money. And I'm so glad I've done those things now because I'm in the position I am. But there is a lot of like self doubt, and you will think, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should. But it's actually just caring less what anyone thinks and just go for it, because that's when the best things happen.
I mean, it sounds like you've definitely got a lot of sort of self-confidence behind you. I know a lot of young people, as you said, are afraid of posting something because they're worried what other people may think about them, whether that be on Instagram or whether that just be pursuing an opportunity, pursuing a business. Do you think this is a sort of confidence you've always had, or is it something you were able to develop over time?
It's something definitely I've developed over time. So when I was a teenager, I had terrible anxiety, like really debilitating anxiety. I was put on medication for it. I couldn't leave my house without having a panic attack. I used to be ill off school if I had to give a presentation because I hated public speaking so much. But it was actually when I started like working like in hospitality and getting jobs and having to communicate with people and having to ask questions that like feel uncomfortable because you don't want to look stupid, that my confidence grew so much. And also therapy, for me personally, I go to therapy and I have been for years, and that has helped my like self-confidence so much. But it's also the people you surround yourself with. So it's something like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so now I'm around confident business owners that are so supportive and love what I do, that actually that helps my self-confidence as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear because I know that's something that a lot of young people struggle with these days, anxiety, what have you. Was there like a moment you recognized it in particular and were like, I need to change something, or was it more of a gradual over time change?
I think it was more over time. I know it got to the point where I literally couldn't do anything, and I thought I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. Like, I'm missing out on friendships being formed, I'm missing out on like social events, things like that. And for me, like, that was quite scary. So I went and got cognitive behavioural therapy to get coping mechanisms for my anxiety. And I actually started pushing myself out my comfort zone because I think the only way to get over the fear of things is by actually doing them. So it was going out to a restaurant with my family and eating some food. It was going for a sleepover at my friend's house. Really small things I just really struggled with. But the more you do them, the better you get at them.
Yeah, it's small steps, I guess. And it's the same with anything in life, whether that be personal sort of mental health struggles or whether that be with entrepreneurship, taking those small steps. So I want to go a little bit more into that. What was really the moment that you were there, like, I've done my apprenticeship and I'm actually want to open my own business now?
So it wasn't really as straightforward as that. So when I finished my apprenticeship, I had never taken a gap year because I started in corporate straight after my A levels, and I knew that I always wanted to go traveling Southeast Asia and find myself like every other teenage girl. And so when I finished my apprenticeship, I thought, right, this is the perfect time to go away and do that now. I've saved up enough money to go traveling. So I was booking my flights to Bali, as one does, and I looked online and it said it was rainy season for the next 3 months. I thought, right, well, I don't want to go to Bali in rainy season, so what do I do? I've already handed in my letter of resignation, like I can't really take that back now and I don't really want to. So either I go back to working in hospitality for 3 months and I save a bit more money up, or do you know what? I'm a qualified accountant now. I could just take the leap, start a business, do it for 3 months. If something happens, great. If it doesn't, fine, I'm off to Bali. Like, there's no bad option. So I actually just made an Instagram and started from there.
So you've been very open about how your dyslexia has influenced your decision to avoid university. How do you turn that sort of maybe challenge in initial schooling life into a strength in your entrepreneurial journey?
I think during my schooling like life, it was such a negative thing. I had a lot of like limiting beliefs because of my dyslexia. It was like you can't spell because you have dyslexia, you can't write that essay very well because you have dyslexia. And so that being like spoken at me for so many years means that I had a lot of like limiting beliefs when it came to being able to do things. But in my entrepreneurial journey, I think I just really embrace my dyslexia. It makes me think outside the box. I'm a lot more creative than a lot of other people, and so I've just really like harnessed that and just used it as more of a superpower than rather something to really just stop me from doing anything.
So what would you say to maybe some young people out there who, whether it be dyslexia or anything else, and are in school and they're finding it difficult, they're struggling a little bit because it's not they haven't necessarily got the support systems in place. What would you say to them, your advice from your experiences and how they can turn what they may see as a weakness into a strength?
I think it's just finding things that make you happy and that you're good at. It's also, for me with dyslexia, it was finding softwares that complemented what I do. So I'll always use the dictation on like Microsoft Word, for example, if I'm writing something down or an email or anything like that. There's new AI tools that can read text for you, and like Adobe, for example, their AI can summarize big PDFs to make them more bite sized. So it's actually just going away and finding small coping mechanisms that work for you, and also not seeing whatever you might have as a disadvantage and going, right, I have XYZ and these are the positives that come with it. and that's what makes me different than everyone else.
Grace, running your business at such a young age is obviously an incredible achievement and the dream of many young people, sort of having their own business, not having to go into a job, be reporting directly to someone else. I'm sure there have been a lot of challenges. I mean, these things always look so easy from the outside and it always looks smooth sailing. Has there been a particular challenge that stands out for you so far?
I think for me, it's struggling to relate to people my age, which might sound really bizarre. But when you start running a business in your early 20s and the rest of your friends are at university, you're leading very different lives. So a lot of my friends were just getting drunk a lot of the time, sleeping in, all that fun stuff that I quite jealous of sometimes. And I'd be working my arse off trying to find clients, going to events, networking, making posts for social media, doing my accounting work, all of that sort of stuff. And sometimes it's quite difficult to take a chill pill. So there have been times where I've gone to friends' parties and festivals and stuff, and I've left early because I'm so stressed about work, or I found it really difficult to have like conversations with people and relate to people because they go, "Oh, what are you doing?" I go, "Oh, I'm working." "Oh, that's cool. Where are you working?" For myself. "That's really cool. What are you doing?" "Oh, I run an accounting firm." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And sometimes that's really quite difficult. But it's finding people in your space. I really struggled finding other young business owners when I was starting out. But now, through a lot of my clients, actually, we formed really lovely friendships because we're both going through the same things. And finding the right networking events for you is really important. I was going to a lot of networking events where, like, the average age was about 40 years old. Those people aren't my clients, and they're not necessarily going to be people I connect with. But it's finding people in your industry and other industries that you can relate to, you can share those struggles because they'll understand.
Yeah, I mean, speaking a little bit about sort of I mean, not necessarily the mental health side of things, but the struggle of being a young entrepreneur. Again, you're committing so much to your business, all responsibility ends on you. So, given the sort of rapid rise and the sort of change from maybe not having as busy of a schedule to an absolutely hectic schedule, how do you maintain that balance to avoid burnout? And what would you suggest as your sort of top tips to aspiring entrepreneurs on how to do that?
I would say I was terrible in the beginning. I definitely suffered from burnout. Everyone was like, take it slow. And I was like, no, I've got so much energy and passion. Like, I'm never going to burn out. And then I burnt out and it was horrible. Like, it was not an enjoyable experience whatsoever. I think it's learning to say no. I was terrible at saying no in the beginning. Any LinkedIn message from literally any random person being like, can I have a meeting? I said yes, even even if they didn't like positively affect my business or had anything to do with the industry I was in, I would just say yes all the time. So it's making sure you learn to say no is really crucial. The next thing I would say is personally, I bought an extra phone. So I have a personal phone and a work phone. So it means that when I go to networking events, I can just take my work phone with me and everyone can connect with me on LinkedIn and all those lovely things. Vice versa, if I'm going to a party or a festival, I don't bring my work phone, I leave it at home and I just take my personal phone so my friends can text me and my mum and my sister, and that's it. It's also doing small acts of self care. So it's like really small things that you don't think of, but when you're running a hectic business, they just go out the window. So it's making sure you've bought snacks if you don't have time to make a meal that day. I bought a massive Stanley water bottle so I drink enough water in a day. It's just taking time for yourself. So if I have a really hectic, like 12-hour day, I'll make sure I watch one episode of something on Netflix before I fall asleep to wind down. Otherwise, you start thinking of work when you're trying to fall asleep, and it's really difficult to fall asleep. So it's just finding small acts of self care, just to look after yourself.
What would you say the difference was prior to sort of you saying no to things versus before when you were saying yes constantly? What would you say that difference was before and after in terms of how you felt both emotionally and sort of just your workload in general?
So before, my workload was insane. I was putting so many meetings in my diary, I didn't actually have any time for my actual work. So the quality of clients was really low. Social media growth wasn't growing because I didn't have time to do it. And 9 times out of 10, these meetings wouldn't lead to any referrals. They weren't benefiting my business in any way. But then as soon as I started saying no and saying yes to the right things, You don't say no to everything, obviously, but it's learning to say no to things that actually don't mean a lot, but saying yes to things that are important, like high quality client leads, saying yes to collaborations, to opportunities. And if you're not quite sure on something, you can say yes, have a discovery call, figure it out, and then say no. Like you can say no at any point, but I was saying yes to a lot of things at the beginning that weren't serving me or my business.
I wanted to bring it back to something you said a few answers ago. You mentioned the importance of networking and finding other people of a similar kind to yourself, young entrepreneurs. Speaking more from even just a professional standpoint away from the sort of personal and social side of things, how important would you say networking is and building up your own sort of professional relationships is when you're just starting out in entrepreneurship?
I think it's so important also to build a really important support network around you of individuals that maybe are 6 months, a year, 5, 10 years into their journey to be able to offer you a helping hand, and give you resources as well. I think that's so unbelievably helpful. So there's people that I'm friends with in the accounting world that have been in it for 20 years offering me help. There's people that offer me templates when I've got a template missing that I can't find that I need. Um, they let me pick up the phone to them on a Friday evening when I've looked at something for too long and I have no idea what's going on. They really take the time out of their day to help me, which I really appreciate. It's also networking with people that aren't in your industry. So it might be that as an accountant, you're probably going to need legal help at some point for one of your clients if they've got a question about contract law or something that I don't know anything about. So it's been able to be that person that they can come to and go, do you know anyone that does XYZ? And you're able to say yes because you're connected to that many people and you have that network that's really, really valuable. And again, with social media, I've networked with social media managers, like YouTube experts, things like that, so that I'm able to go to them, hey, do you mind reviewing this? And then they're able to give me feedback. And mostly just for free because we've built up that relationship, which is so valuable.
I mean, speaking about those relationships, what about mentors? Have you had any specific mentors that really stand out for yourself who have supported you in your journey?
I wouldn't say mentors necessarily, but they're definitely some of my closest friends that I know I can reach out to, especially in accounting. So, Bev Flanagan is a woman I met at a Women's Day International lunch in person for the first time, but I've been to a couple of her talks beforehand, like in prior months, and I thought she was absolutely amazing. She grew, scaled, and then sold her practice. And that's something I really admire from her. She's absolutely fabulous. And so she's definitely someone that will always help me no matter what. Again, there's another lady called Alex Falcon. She runs an accountancy practice. She answers all of my stupid questions if I'm confused. And we'll always do like co-working days together. And she does digital nomading, which is something I wanted to get into for the longest time, to be able to take my work away to Bali. So we've been on a trip together, and she's really helped me just make sure my practice has all the systems in place that it needs to be able to go away.
Grace, I'm sure when first starting your own business, or whether even prior to that with your apprenticeship, there must have been a lot of pressure on yourself. People want you to go down traditional career paths, whether it's friends or family. How would you say you navigated those pressures, both pursuing the apprenticeship and then even going and starting your own business, as opposed to maybe going and getting a traditional job at an established organization?
So I think for me, I was very lucky in the fact that my mum was open to a non-traditional route. She hadn't gone to university either. It was more my school at the time that was a bit, I think, disappointed that I didn't pick the university route. They didn't have a lot of knowledge on apprenticeships at that time either, so it was very difficult for them to help me navigate that route as well. So it was literally just me and my mum navigating the world of apprenticeships together. But I think again, it's what I said earlier. It's learning to care less. If you've got pressures on you, you can fall into those pressures if you want to, if they're too much. But it's also knowing that this is your life. You have to make the decisions that are right for you. If uni is that decision, like the right decision for you, then great, go for it. You'll have the best time. But if you're in your head, you're a little bit worried, you're not quite sure if it's the right thing, It's a very long time, like it's 3 to 4 years, a university degree. It's very expensive. You're probably going to have to repay that student loan for the majority of your career. So you do need to make sure it's the right decision for you. But it's going away, doing research. There's loads of apprenticeship fairs you can go to now and meet the employers and people that have been in that apprenticeship to get an understanding if it's the right thing for you as well.
So, what would you maybe say to a young person who's maybe in a less supportive household, for example, where they're maybe feeling a little bit more pressured to going down to the traditional university path and they're really unsure, they really don't think it's the right path, they want to go and do something more practical? What advice could you maybe give to them to support them in either pursuing it and trying to sort of force their way through, or whether sort of yielding a little bit, going down the university path, but still being able to gain those practical skill sets along the way?
Yeah, so if the pressure's really on and it's looking like you're going to have to go to university, I would 100% make sure that your degree has 1 year of work experience in it because that year is so, so valuable. If it's not, making sure you've got internships lined up just by emailing companies and firms. A lot of things that I know have worked for other friends where their parents weren't as supportive of an apprenticeship is actually a cheeky little PowerPoint is getting together all the stats about a degree apprenticeship. So the fact that you usually start on anything from 20 to about £27,000 a year in your first year, and it goes up. So you can exit on about 50k if you're in investment banking or a banking apprenticeship like that, which is obviously an amazing salary to be leaving at like 21, 22 years old. The fact that your degree is paid for by your employers, and so is any extra qualifications that you gain along the way. The fact that you get hands-on experience for 3 years, 9 times out of 10 there is a guaranteed job at the end. So that stability is also a really important key factor as well. And then just getting case studies of like people together that have done it and now they're here and there and everywhere. I think that's really important to show to parents because they will have probably been down that university route and apprenticeships didn't have a very good rep when they were going to university. They were seen as probably the thing to do if you were a bit dumb and couldn't get into university, whereas now that's changing. So I would just put all the facts to your parents as well, just so they can understand where you're coming from too.
Yeah, I like the idea of a little PowerPoint presentation to the parents, but I think it all boils down to, with every decision you make, being prepared, coming correct with the numbers, coming with the stats. I mean, speaking about being prepared, I wanted to talk about yourself again. Take me back to when you first were thinking about starting the business. Again, you mentioned creating that Instagram page. How prepared would you say you were at the time?
I wasn't prepared whatsoever. I didn't have a plan. I wrote out a business plan, which was terrible. It basically had my startup costs in it, what I wanted my business to be called, and what it was going to do. That was basically it. I was wildly unprepared. I think for me, I always believe that the first step is always the hardest. So starting is always the hardest, and then it's just easier from there. So I thought, right, if I overthink this, then I'm never going to do it because I believe that you can never plan enough for a business. There's always going to be something that you forget. It's obviously great to plan, and in retrospect, I would have put something a bit more comprehensive together. I didn't, and it is what it is. But you don't have to know everything to start, you literally just have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big one that a lot of maybe young aspiring entrepreneurs sort of struggle with, is the feeling of, am I prepared enough versus I know as soon as I get into it, as soon as I just start and learn by doing, I'm going to become more prepared by day. If you had to give a few sort of key things though that a young entrepreneur could do, the sort almost like a checklist of certain things that they're knowledgeable about or understand, what would you say those sort of things might be?
So I would definitely do your startup cost. That's really important, especially if you're going to quit your job before you start your business. It's really important that you know you have the right amount of savings just in case you don't get any clients for X amount of months, just as a backup. I would also say creating your client avatar. So that's mind mapping your ideal client. What salary are they on? What do they look like? Where do they hang out? What hobbies do they have? What age are they? What gender? All that sort of stuff is really, really important. So you know who you're marketing to and selling to. I would then also say social media. I think social media is such a powerful tool, and on the whole, it's free. So it's free marketing. I think you'd be really stupid not to get social media for your business. So with that, it's planning out your content pillars. So I have three, for example. and it's understanding what you want to do on social media, and mind mapping your client avatars' pain points and then giving solutions to their problems, so that people can relate to you and you're giving people value as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about social media. How important would you say it is for someone to start building up their own personal brand online and using, I mean, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool to start connecting with sort of professionals around the world and building their network in that way?
Yeah, I think it's so unbelievably important. Having a personal brand is, I mean, I couldn't recommend it enough. That's how I get all the amazing opportunities I get now, is all through my personal brand that I've built. I would say though that you do need those content pillars to build that personal brand, because you have to understand what your personal brand is there to do. So mine, for example, is talking about apprenticeships, running a business, and basically my challenges like dyslexia. That is what I predominantly speak about. And those are my content pillars. They don't have to be anything crazy, but you do have to be authentic, make sure they're real to you, but also know where you're heading.
Grace, entrepreneurship is filled with a lot of ups and downs. I want you to take me back to that very first moment you've got your first client. What was that feeling like?
Oh my God, I was over the moon. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. I'm building a business. But you're just so over the moon, because you're like, before it, you're like, oh, can I do it? Can I not? And then you get your first client, you're like, okay, like it's a nice little confidence boost, I think.
Definitely. Well, I mean, entrepreneurship is filled with so much doubt. And again, you as a sole founder, that's also another one of the sort of difficulties that you have had to face, maybe unique to other entrepreneurs. A lot of other entrepreneurs get a co-founder not only to help with the workload, but also with the sort of mental support. You know, we all go through our cycles of doubt. How would you say you've coped with that? I know you have your obviously your support networks, but ultimately at the end of the day, in the business, it was only you at the beginning. So how do you think you dealt with that?
I think it's very much about mindset. So it's having a positive and a growth mindset. You will always have setbacks. You will send a proposal out and a potential client will say no. Not everyone is going to say yes. That's okay. It's also learning not to take everything personally. And it's really difficult at the beginning because obviously you are your business, so everything feels personal. But realistically, it's not, and you just need to be able to take a step back. Again, for me, therapy has been a massive help. So if I'm dealing with awful imposter syndrome or anything like that, I know I can go to my therapist and talk it out. It's also my family have been so helpful. So if I'm having a terrible week, I know I can call my mum. She'll pick up the phone. She'll talk me down from whatever crazy thing I'm saying at that point. Um, and again, it's just making sure you have those people to reach out and to vent to.
Grace, what is it that motivates you to achieve all that you have done so far? And I'm sure you've got even bigger plans for the future. What actually would you say is the motivating factor behind it all?
So for me, ever since I was young, before my mum went into teaching, she was a nurse. So it was installed in me from a very young age to help people. So I love helping people so much. And when I realised the massive disparity and lack of financial education in schools and young people, I was speaking to so many business owners that were like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need an accountant because I don't know anything. And it wasn't that they didn't know anything in business, it was actually personal finance as well that they didn't really know a lot about. So for me, now I help teach financial education in schools, young people and business owners as well. And for me, that's my massive purpose. So at the moment, I'm lobbying the government to um, make like legislative change to financial education in schools. And that for me is my big why.
Why do you think financial education is so important for young entrepreneurs?
Because it's just, I don't think it's even just for young entrepreneurs. I think it's for every single young person, every person, full stop, because it just gives you that massive base education for everything. So, whether that be credit, taxes, saving, investing, retirement, that is financial education. It is everything, and it's so crucial and important to everyone. When you're starting a business, especially as an entrepreneur, you need to know what your income is, what your expenses are, what your net profit is, and a lot of those people don't know what those words mean. And so if you're also spending all the money that comes into the business, you don't have any profit, you don't have anything to live off of. And so, therefore, that's why basic knowledge of financial education is so important, especially when it comes to paying taxes. You need to know how much tax you're predicted to pay so you can put it aside and make sure you've got enough money and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's literally so important for everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you're lobbying the government at the minute regarding financial education and reforms to it. I think you're spot on there. I think it's one of the most important things, and I was really quite startled by the lack of sort of financial education and basic skill building, even tools such as Excel that we don't get taught in schools. What do you think needs to be done to change this?
I think there's a multitude of things that could be done. Currently, financial education is only being taught in 4% of schools in England, which is an absolutely dire statistic. So, obviously, that needs to increase, first of all. The second thing is that on average, only 48 minutes of financial education is being taught instead of the recommended 30 hours, which is also another scary statistic. So, that needs to increase. Again, having a centralised hub of quality resources that are available to teachers, students, young people, business owners, etc., would be massive, because if we're going to promote it in schools, we have to remember that people like me, for example, I wasn't taught financial education in school. I'm not going to be taught it in school because I've left school now, but I still need to be taught it because it's still so crucial in my journey, especially as someone that's in my early 20s that wants to buy a house potentially somewhere in the future. I need to learn how to save and invest my money for a house deposit, learn what a mortgage is, etc., etc. So that's where the centralised hub of resources come in, because that will be available to everyone of any age.
Yeah, and they can all start building up their own sort of knowledge, whether it be for entrepreneurship, whether it just be for their personal self. I mean, you'll know when you first start your business, all of a sudden you've got all of these responsibilities. How would you say for a young entrepreneur who is, okay, I want to start my own business, but I don't know where to get started. I don't know what I need to learn first, or whether I can just start doing things, and what the necessary steps are that takes me from someone with an idea to someone with a business. What would you say those are?
I think it's different for everyone. I'd say for me personally, the first things I did is I came up with a name, which is my last name with accounting afterwards, because I couldn't think of anything more original. Coming up with a logo, making a social media page, and then the first thing I did was I started to create free resources that I put on my website. So things that are informative and help people. People could download them, and then I had their emails to be able to put them into email marketing, for example, and send them updates on tax and legislation, autumn budget, spring budget, all those sorts of things. So it's just drumming up awareness about what you're doing and just putting yourself out there as much as you possibly can.
Grace, as a young female entrepreneur, I know that there are probably unique challenges that come within that. Do you think there are any particular challenges that you have faced being unique to being a woman, and any advice you would give to young women out there who maybe feel afraid or pressured away from pursuing a career in entrepreneurship?
I think, yeah, there's loads of sexism in most industries. Obviously, in finance, it's a very sexist industry. If you have any free time, to anyone listening, the FCA brought out a report in March of 2024, earlier this year, called Sexism in the City, all about the gender pay gap, sexual harassment, sexual assault in finance. The report is terrifying, but it's really important that it was done to highlight those discrepancies. I think in some of the big banks, there is a gender pay gap. I think for bonuses of about 40% between males and females, sorry, which is absolutely astounding. So for me, especially online, being a young female in accounting, I get tons of sexism. There is so many boys and men that comment going, "You're not qualified for this. You're just a woman." Blah 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 blah. I've heard it all. But it's really important to remember that those people are usually just commenting out of jealousy. If you have spare time to comment on someone's TikTok, it usually means because you're not doing a lot with your life. You shouldn't have that much free time. And so they're usually just jealous because they haven't done it. So it's just learning to be okay with that. And also, you can review comments, you can make sure certain words can't be commented as well, which is really helpful. But it's just making sure that you're doing the best for you, and again, finding those other females in entrepreneurship as well, because it is difficult, but when you've got other women that you can relate to and chat to those issues about, then it makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, even away from just doing well for yourself personally? Again, you mentioned it, you're spot on. When people are commenting sort of awful things online, that be on TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever platform that they're doing it on, normally if they're commenting something that's not very nice, they're probably doing it because they haven't got much else going on for themselves. But how important would you say it is as well, and in terms of part of your mission, being vocal, being sort of a big figure in the space of women entrepreneurship to inspire young girls out there to go and pursue their own path?
Yeah, I think it's so, so important. Like, you can only write your future. And it was always difficult when you look in an industry and you can't find anyone that looks like yourself. But then go be that person, and then you'll inspire other women and make the path easier for them to be able to go and do it. But if you want to go do something, like, it's your life, you only have one, like, you need to take it with both hands and just do what you want.
Grace, thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up, we do have a closing tradition here where we ask if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your 16-year-old self. Granted, that's actually not too long ago for yourself. What would that piece of advice be?
I think it would tell her to have more confidence and again, just care less. 16-year-old me cared so much about what every single person thought of me, even if they didn't know me. I would have had so much more confidence and done more with myself if I cared less.
Grace, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It's been incredible talking to you today, understanding a little bit about your business and what the path that's taken you to get there. So huge, huge thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.